Alright, this is a quick review on adding and subtracting fractions. At the very top I put 2 apples plus 5 oranges equals what? 2 apples plus 5 oranges equals what? The famous saying about apples and oranges, you've heard people say, it's like comparing apples and oranges. They're two things that are different. To be able to add those, I could say, well, I have 2 apples, 5 oranges, that means I have 7, and you probably in your head are saying fruit, right? Because you verbally, through language, you went to a common denominator. You knew that you couldn't call them all apples and you couldn't call them all oranges, so you called them separate fruits. That's the category they both fit into. So that's a review for us to remember that when we're adding and subtracting fractions, it's very similar to adding and subtracting decimals. You have to line up the decimal that gets the same size pieces added and subtracted together. Same thing in fractions. So on this first problem, I have sevenths and fifths, and I can't call them all sevenths, I can't call them all fifths, but they all fit into a common denominator of 35. So I'm going to go to 35ths. Now whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So on this top one, you took it times 5. You have to take it times 5, and you get 15. On this one, you took it times 7, so you need to take it times 7, you get 7. And now you're ready to add your pieces. You have 15 pieces and 7 pieces, and they're all the same size piece now. You have 22 pieces. The bottom doesn't change. They're still 35ths. That's the size of the piece. Remember, the bottom's like the denominator's like it's like a label. You have 22 pieces, and they are the size 35ths. On the second one, you might say, well, that's a subtraction problem. It is, but of course, I'm going to teach you to do leave, change, opposite. Now you're looking at an addition problem because they have the same sign, so you add and use that same sign. Every time I do a problem like this, I always figure out my negative part of that answer at the very beginning. I know it's going to be negative because they're both on team negatives. So now I need to add them together. To do that, I need to find a common denominator. So I'm looking at 5 and 6. The common denominator for 5 and 6 is 30. This one you took times 6, so you better take that top times 6 and get 18. Took this one times 5, so you better take that top times 5 and get 5. Now, we're ready to add. I have 18 pieces and 5 pieces, so together I have 23 pieces. Remember, the denominator is just like a label. That's how big the pieces are. They're 30ths. And then don't forget your whole numbers. 4 and 1 make 5. Now, one common mistake is, remember when I knew the answer was negative was a minute ago when I first started this problem. That's why I have this box down here, because I'm going to move my answer over. And remember that it is negative 5 and 23 30ths. All right, one more example problem. 8 2/3 plus 2 5/8. They're both positive, so I already know this one's going to be positive. I already have a whole number of 10. I could do that first. 8 plus 2 is 10, but I need to go to a common denominator. So my common denominator is going to be 24. That's where 3 and 8 match up. This one you took times 8, so you need to take the top times 8. This one you took times 3, so you need to take the top times 3. When you add these together, you have 16 pieces and 15 pieces, which is 31 pieces. Remember, the bottom, the denominator, is just like a label. They're 24ths. So I have 10 and 31 24ths. The only problem with this is it's part mixed and part improper. So I'm going to convert that 31 24ths. Remember, two things on top of each other means divide. So I'm going to divide those, and I get 1 with a remainder of 7. Remember that what that is. That's 1 and 7 24ths. 1 whole and 7 remaining pieces out of 24. And then I put that 10 together with the whole number of 1 and make it 11. And our answer is 11 and 7 24ths. All right, with subtracting fractions, it's very similar. It's the exact same process with one exception, and that's when we have to borrow. In fractions, borrowing is a little bit different. But we'll go over that. First one looks like an addition problem, but I have a negative, so those have different signs, so I need to subtract sign of the larger. I'm going to put my box down at the bottom. And maybe you're not sure which one's bigger right now as far as the absolute value, so you might want to wait. I can tell that the negative is bigger, so my answer is going to be negative. But I need to go to a common denominator. So with 9 and 2, I'm going to 18ths. Now I'm looking at taking this times 2, so I need to take this times 2. So it would be negative 16 18ths. And then I took this one times 9, so I need to take this one times 9. Now you can see why I knew that negative was bigger as far as an absolute value. So those guys are fighting. The 16 and the 9 fight, and they have 7 winners that are on the team negative And remember, the bottom is just like a label. Our answer is negative 7/18. Second one, I'm going to do leave change opposite, which now lets me know that they're on different teams, so I'm going to have to subtract sign of the larger. The larger absolute value is the negative one, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And then I need to make sure I put the top one, the larger absolute value on top, so I want to make it that 9 1/3 minus 4 5/7. That's the order that I want to subtract these in. So I'm going to go to a common denominator of 21. Took this times 7, so you take the top times 7. Took this times 3, so you take the top times 3. All right, and here is where we're going to have to borrow. Let me cross this out because we're done with those. We're in common denominator. And I have 7 minus 15. Well, that doesn't work out very well. And so I borrow. Now in decimals, when you borrow, you cross it out and you just always put a 1 in front of what that next digit over. That's because in decimals, every digit is worth 10 times the digit behind it. But not in fractions. In fractions, you want to borrow a whole, and you want to borrow it in a common denominator. So you're looking at the bottom here and saying, I want to borrow 21 21sts. I already had 7 of those 21sts, and I borrowed 21 more, so now I have 28 21sts. Now I'm ready to subtract. 28 minus 15 is 13. Remember, the bottom is like a label. We're in 21st. And 8 minus 4 is 4. Now be careful because you have to remember that scoots over here. And that's why I put this box over here, because otherwise I might forget the negative. My answer is negative 4 and 13 21st. All right, the last problem. It's an addition problem, but they are on different teams, so I'm going to have to subtract sign of the larger. Again, the larger absolute value is negative, so I already know it's going to be negative. I want to put the larger absolute value on the top, so I'm going to rewrite this as negative 6 3/11 minus 2 2/3. And remember, I'm dealing with their absolute value, so I don't really need that negative anymore. So I'm really doing 6 3/11 minus 2 2/3. I go to my common denominator of 33. Took this one times 3 right here, so I need to take this times 3, and I get 9. Took this one times 11, so I take this one times 11, and I get 22. Then remember, I'm done with this because I've gone to common denominator. But I want to take 9 minus 22, and I can't, so I borrow. Think about how many you borrow this time. Remember how last time we borrowed in a common denominator of 21? Now we're in a common denominator of 33, so I'm going to be borrowing 33 33rds. So when I mark that out, I'm borrowing 33. 33 plus 9 is 42. Now the shortcut is, it's just these two numbers. You borrowed the bottom number, the denominator. You already had the top number, so you add those together, and you're at 42. So 42 minus 22 is 20. Remember, they're 33rds. That's what we're in for a common denominator. And 5 minus 2 is 3. And luckily, I already have my negative there.